When visualizing the future of transportation, we often tend to think of the antigravity or maglev conveyances of science fiction, which includes hoverboards and hovercars. In fact, the inspiration and in-universe description for the hoverboard propulsion system of Back to the Future actually is maglev. Of course, the board should only be able to hover over metallic surfaces. In storytelling, this can be conveniently ignored, but in the real world, maglev will be significantly limited as it requires metallic tracks or magnetic flux generators over which the conveyance hovers. As with maglev, true antigravity in the form of gravity shielding or repulsive gravity or gravlev might also have its own caveats, such as induced gravitational eddies or even temporal effects. Antigravity shielding, in particular, would be extremely useful in lifting and transporting megaton masses over the Earth's surface, or even up into space. Unlike other lifting methods, gravity shielding would result in an actual weight loss, or reduction of weight, preventing especially heavy masses from buckling, crumbling, or deforming under their own weights. This would be game-changing in the world of space launching and terrestrial mega-constructions. But we might wonder what effects such definitive reductions in gravity might have on local time. According to relativity, a reduction in gravity should result in a speed-up of time, whilst a super strong repulsive gravity field generated to push against terrestrial gravity would likely slow down time. If the temporal effects are significant, such anti-gravity devices might have to be operated remotely, reserved mainly for mega to gigaton level operations, and might not as easily be integrated into everyday travel as we might like. If this is found to be the case, and given maglev's own limitations, we might turn to a more familiar and conventional form of levitation, namely buoyancy, for a future paradigm in commercial and civilian travel. In recent years, advanced hybridized airships or lighter-than-air vehicles seem to be getting a serious commercial reconsideration. Balloon technology is very versatile in that it can be easily combined with current and future propulsion methods. For instance, balloon airships could be combined with vertically oriented jets so that it could elevate to a required height much more quickly, after which point the jets could be disengaged, enabling the ship to hover quietly with no further energy expenditure. Similar jets mounted on top of the vehicle could allow for more rapid descent. Dirigibles could also be hybridized with more unconventional forms of lift and thrust, such as laser photon pressure thrusters or magneto-dynamic ion thrusters. Further, if we do discover practical anti-gravity in the future, this could be combined with balloon airships as well, as long as the gravity fields are not strong enough to interfere with local time or cause other disruptive gravitational disturbances, as previously mentioned. A device which could lighten a payload via gravity shielding or repulsive gravity would require less volume of gas and could therefore result in much smaller and more aerodynamically designed airships. Combining anti-gravity and other forces with balloon technology is not an entirely new concept. It is discussed in some detail in the book John Worrell Keely, Free Energy Pioneer, by author Theo Paijmans. In the book, Paijmans details a number of novels written in the late 1800s with engrossing tales woven around innovative and unconventional forms of aerial vehicles, their enhanced propulsion systems enabling them to explore previously inaccessible regions of the planet and a cosmos inhabited by super societies and extraterrestrials. One story mentions a gas called lucigen, which increases in buoyancy tenfold when an electric current is passed through it. Ships made with this unique gas were called lucigenostats and were further enhanced by powerful magnets mounted on them so as to attract to the Earth's magnetic field, significantly enhancing both lift and stabilization. Paijmans explains that the authors of these fascinating literary pieces were often inspired by real-world concepts, discoveries, and inventions, such as those developed by John Worrell Keely and others. We may wonder then if such a principle of electrically enhanced buoyancy of a gas was inspired by a real-life discovery which has been subsequently lost, or if it is an entirely fictional creation. Also in his fascinating book, Paijmans mentions another peculiar gas that is claimed to have had a definite trail in the real world called NB gas. The formula to create this unique gas was claimed to have been discovered by a man named Peter Menes, a member of a secret society named the Sonera Aero Club. The ship built using this gas was called the Aero Goosey, The strange conveyance was allegedly built using a large basket with two large balloons for lift on each end. Drawings of the ship apparently revealed wheels to ride along the ground, as well as an amphibious undercarriage to enable it to travel on water. What was especially odd about the drawings and diagrams of these ships, however, was that the structures were far out of proportion to the balloons that were supposed to be providing the said lift. This was purportedly due to the antigravity property of the gas, which was claimed to have not lifted the payload weight, but rather negated it. More conservative theorists have suggested that the gas may have simply been a lighter and therefore more buoyant gas than hydrogen. Hydrogen, of course, being the lightest natural gas so far discovered. This would result in balloons which could be significantly smaller than those filled with hydrogen or helium. As radical as the NB gas sounds, a gas with enhanced buoyancy is not entirely impossible. A particle called muonium is considered to be lighter than hydrogen and has been created in the laboratory. However, it decays quickly and thus has been so far difficult to study in large quantities. Nevertheless, its existence suggests that similar particles or formulas might be possible. Interestingly, the claimed antigravity properties of the NB gas may not be entirely impossible either. It has been found that sound wave particles, or phonons, have a natural buoyancy in a gravitational field and tend to, quote-unquote, fall upwards. Gravitationally buoyant particles would indeed be classified as antigravity, and if they could be harnessed in a balloon-type structure, might be able to perform the feats of motivity ascribed to the fabled NB gas. Is it possible that Peter Menes stumbled upon such a formula which has since been lost, or perhaps rediscovered in recent times and then classified? It is an intriguing thought, but at present, probably the most credible dirigible craft mentioned in Paijmans' book is the lucid genostat, an airship in which the lift is enhanced and stabilized by the interaction between onboard magnets and the geomagnetic field. There is at least one real-world application of this principle found in alternative science literature. A number of years ago, I found a fascinating article entitled Joseph Newman's Electromagnetic Air Space Vehicle on the now-defunct site KeelyNet, developed by late alternative science researcher Jerry Decker. It says, Joseph Newman's electromagnetic air and space vehicle prototype consists of an aluminized helium balloon wrapped with 38-gauge copper wire. The system is normally heavier than air. When the wire coil is connected to a 200-volt battery, the balloon gradually lifts into the air. It then aligns with the Earth's magnetic field as it rises. If the current is cut off, the balloon immediately begins to fall. If the current direction is reversed, the balloon rotates to align with the Earth's field. The balloon can be made to rotate or oscillate by manipulating the direction of the current flow. If the current is periodically switched so that the balloon always repels the Earth's magnetic field, its rate of descent is about 25% faster than the case of steady attraction of the coils to the Earth's field. Joseph Newman's design calls for a creation of a magnetic field which is on average about equal to the Earth's field over the volume of the balloon in terms of strength. Proposed mechanisms for the device levitation includes the ohmic heating of the helium gas, electromagnetic interaction of the helium atoms with the applied fields, and interaction of the applied magnetic field with the Earth's magnetic field. The missive goes on to say that it is intended that the craft can operate entirely through interaction with the Earth's magnetic field once it leaves the atmosphere, the interaction being especially strong in the ionosphere and persisting in the Earth's magnetotail. This concept seems to be mirrored in the Edward Lee Scowning's book, Magnetic Current. Lee Scowning was the diminutive creator of the famed Coral Castle or Rockgate Park, a modern-day megalith in Homestead, Florida, which curiously seems to embody the exact same arcane construction techniques of the ancient temple structures. To this day, it is still a mystery as to how the impoverished Lee Scowning was able to lift and move massive blocks of coral without heavy machinery, with many theorizing that he used atypical principles such as weight reduction or even outright levitation. In his book, Lee Scowning advises rocket engineers to harness planetary and celestial magnetism to enhance the efficiency of sending rockets from the Earth to the Moon. The Newman article concludes with a few additional points in that the total payload is proportional to vehicle volume, The electromagnetic torque and lift are also proportional to the volume in this design, and navigation is achieved by manipulating the orientation of the coils. In regard to attempting to lift a mass via interaction with a relatively weak geomagnetic field, Newman says that just as a long-legged spider can lift itself from the surface of a pond by dispersing its body weight over a wide area upon the molecular surface tension of the water, so too by analogy can a vehicle lift itself from the surface of the planet by dispersing a magnetic field over a wide area upon the planet's magnetic field. This statement by Newman parallels the magnacraft concept described in my video, Geomagnetic Levitation, Project Magna and the Magnacraft. This concept proposes that we should be able to overcome the uniformity and relative weakness of the Earth's magnetic field by generating an electromagnetic field that covers a large area. As the equation here implies, this would grant the larger change in magnetic energy needed to produce significantly stronger lifting forces. Newman's unique craft is said to represent a vastly improved means for propulsion and navigation of helium balloons, or blimps, and that large-scale versions could very well carry us gently and safely into space. The article itself was written by physicist Dr. Roger Hastings, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Virginia in the late 70s, specializing in research into organic superconductors and the physical properties of solutions of microions and viruses. Dr. Hastings had been a principal physicist with the Unisys information technology company and also designed electric motors. A key piece of information that seems to be missing from Dr. Hastings' description is the orientation of the coil's wrappings around the aluminized balloons. Given the description of the demonstration, I would think that the balloon's coil will be vertically oriented around the balloon as shown in the diagram in order to provide lift. I can confirm very small amounts of lift with vertically oriented solenoids when energizing them with sufficient DC current, but the detail of the balloon also aligning with the Earth's magnetic field is something I haven't observed in my own experiments. Initially, when we think of magnetic alignment, we tend to think of a compass rotating in the horizontal plane in order to align with the Earth's magnetic field. Some additional research revealed the following document, which actually does seem to support a vertical winding of the balloon's coil. And indeed, I could see this version of the balloon device rotating in the horizontal plane in order to align with the Earth's field, just like we would imagine a lighter-than-air compass would. But I don't yet see how it could generate much vertical lift. I might instead postulate that any lift with a coil wrapped this way might have been caused almost exclusively via ohmic heating of the gas. But the author believes that the high resistance of the 38-gauge wire will yield relatively little heating. My geomagnetic experiment here is comprised of a steel poker wrapped with a coil, and this suspended from the center by a thread. In this position, the coil is wound vertically around the poker, just as the author claims Newman's balloon was. As it is essentially an electromagnetic compass, it aligns itself with the horizontal component of the geomagnetic field by rotating in the horizontal plane. But the device's movement also has a vertical dimension. Each close of the switch causes it to dip down on one side. Reversing the current causes the other side to dip upon each close. This is due to the interaction with the vertical component of the Earth's magnetic field. But I will have to perform these experiments with actual helium balloons in place of pokers and cylinders in order to determine if there really is any net lift. If the balloon does in fact generate lift with a vertically wound coil, I might still question if the lift strength will be maximized. It just seems that the vertical force will be significantly greater if the coil is wound horizontally, as in my previous diagrams, with the alignment rotation of the balloon in the vertical rather than the horizontal plane. I could see either of these winding orientations as providing enhanced aerial stabilization, similar to what is mentioned in the lucigenostats though. I do find it interesting and odd, however, that the author does not mention the aluminum wrapping or coating over the balloon, as was included in Dr. Hastings' original report, instead noting only that the balloon was mylar. He also states that the device was powered by 2 banks of 9-volt batteries, adding up to 306 volts, which is a voltage figure more than 50% higher than the 200 volts that Dr. Hastings gave. The discrepancies with Dr. Hastings' report, including his somewhat contradiction that ohmic heating was one of the main factors of lift, might cast at least some measure of doubt concerning the author's proposed clarification of the device setup. But this is where our own experiments can come to the rescue. And needless to say, this will be an interesting experiment to perform. The tantalizing balloon propulsion ideas mentioned in Free Energy Pioneer, as well as the details of Joseph Newman's electromagnetic airship, hold great inspiration and potential in improving modern and future airship technologies. Among the pertinent questions regarding improvements are: 1. Can we develop gases that are both lighter and less volatile than hydrogen? And 2. How can we stimulate gases in such a way as to enhance their buoyancy? We already know we can do this with heat, as practically demonstrated in hot air balloons. And ohmic heating of helium molecules is touted as one of the lifting forces in Newman's model. We know that heat is energy associated with movement and vibration of atoms and molecules within a substance. The faster the molecules vibrate, the more heat is present in that substance. We also know that sound is vibration, and so could high-frequency sound enhance the buoyancy of a gas, perhaps without the potentially destructive effects of high heat? Heat energizes a gas's molecules, causing them to spread out and take up more space, hence increasing gas's volume. Perhaps sound, also as a manifestation of vibrational energy, could do the same by resonating the gas reservoir's cavity. Or perhaps we should resonate the gas molecules themselves. Worrell Keely claimed that all matter has its own acoustic resonant frequencies, or chords, resulting from the summations of its molecules and atoms. His and others' work implies that sound vibrations can even cause solids to actually levitate and defy gravity. Hence, this property would most certainly also extend to a gas, which is also matter. And it's mirrored in the aforementioned article on the proposed gravitational buoyancy of photons. Vibrating a gas would essentially generate photon activity, photons which have been observed to have a type of anti-gravity-like property, hence theoretically making the gas more buoyant than normal, just as heating the gas would. There's also the idea of vacuum balloons, the idea being that a cavity with a complete vacuum inside should be not only lighter than air, just as with balloons filled with hydrogen and helium, but also lighter and more buoyant than even those gases due to there being literally nothing inside of the said cavity. It's a fascinating idea, the caveat being that any cavity with a vacuum inside will be subjected to tremendous external atmospheric pressure to the tune of 14.7 pounds per square inch without any counterforce, and would usually catastrophically implode. And any cavity strong enough not to cave in would likely be so thick and heavy as to negate any extra buoyancy gain that a vacuum might have over a gas. All in all, balloon airship technology, especially if the tech could be improved in the manners just mentioned or in other ways, would be one of the ultimate forms of air travel. No whirling blades or debris clouds, no minimum speed required to remain aloft, and practically no fuel expenditure to remain afloat at any height. Balloon airships also have a tremendous elevation range, being able to hover from mere feet above the ground to 10,000 feet. There is even research being conducted which may enable airships to reach 60,000 feet, a height about 50% greater than that of commercial passenger planes. Of course, dirigibles and blimps can approximate the velocity and magnitudes of planes, but if ways could be found to develop lighter than hydrogen gases or hybridize them with other forms of propulsion, their structures could be reduced and streamlined, mitigating wind resistance and resulting in greatly improved top speeds. Further, these conveyances, floating via fluid buoyancy, exert no repulsion or traction forces and would therefore have minimal impact or disturbance on environmental elements as high-powered maglev or gravlev might. We should continue to develop maglev to its ultimate potential and continue our research into antigravity, but in our quest for greener technologies, we should not neglect the balloon airship, an already proven technology which, with a few modifications, could enable us to more efficiently lift tremendous weights to any height and to even the most inaccessible regions of the planet with far less energy. We might wonder if the ancients also realized this. It is still a mystery as to how the ancient architects were able to lift and move massive stones huge distances over uneven terrain, hills, and mountains. This includes regions in which there is no apparent evidence of extinct waterways which could have been used to transport these materials. One example is the legend of Namedal, a huge megalithic site in the Pacific, which mentions massive building stones as being flown from a difficult-to-reach quarry at a high elevation and into place at the building sites by giant birds or roosters. Could the region's oral tradition of these flying birds have been inspired by giant balloon conveyances in the shapes of birds? Interestingly, giant animal-shaped hot air balloons are mentioned by author Shirley Andrews in her book on Atlantis, claiming that the technology dates back to well over 50,000 years. A more definitive history of lighter-than-air technology, though, is reflected in Chinese lantern festivals, which date back to nearly 2,000 years. Some of these lanterns can float in the air as they are essentially miniaturized hot air balloons made of paper. These unique lanterns are the inspiration behind the modern breathtaking rise events and other sky lantern festivals. Additionally, author Jim Woodman and late balloonist Julian Knott have also proven that the materials and technology to build massive hot air balloons existed during the time of the creation of the famous Nazca lines 1,500 to 2,500 years ago. This, though they were clear to point out that there is not yet any definitive proof that the Nazca developed such technology, perhaps to assist in creating and observing the lines, only that it was possible given the materials available at the time. Nevertheless, this proposed arcane technology will only have required fire, the original energy source, and perhaps a loom to create large amounts of fabric, the loom itself dating back to over 6,000 years ago. We could ponder the implications of the ancients possessing such knowledge and technology thousands of years earlier than even the Nazca, but that's a topic for another video. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned.